Hello, well, welcome to the June edition of Just Move In's residential expert discussion. We're joined again today by Mark Hayward, who probably needs no introduction, former Chief Executive of Property Mark, and now a Just Move In ambassador and our residential expert. So how are you, Mark?
I'm well, thank you, James. Well.
Good to see you again. Today, we're going to talk about, as normal, the things that have been in the property news, and also some of the things that we've been talking about on the Just Move In blog. And I guess the thing that we should kick off with very quickly is to talk about the Renters Reform Bill. We weren't expecting anything major to be announced in the Queen's speech. I just really wanted to touch base with you on that and whether you think that what was announced was expected and you saw what you expected to see. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, it was there, but slightly disguised. I think there is a feeling of, the government has continued to promise this, but it's still failing actually to materialise in a bill. Is it being kicked into the long grass? We don't know. We know there is going to be a major housing announcement in just a few days, in early June, from either the Prime Minister or from the Secretary of State for DLUP, Ministry for Levelling Up, Michael Gove. I think because we've had just a plethora of housing ministers over a number of years, is the government actually going to come up and deliver this? So I haven't got a crystal ball, so I don't know. I think we're moving forward, but not a great. Well, the feeling I'm getting, and having had that vote of no confidence, which the Prime Minister survived, is that going to prompt a reshuffle? And is that going to prompt a refocus on priorities? So, as ever, housing gets kicked down to the bottom of the list.
Typical. I mean, the sense I got before all the political shenanigans this week was that this was actually going to happen, and we could perhaps expect a white paper in, I think, July. But you're right; it could be kicked into the long grass now. I mean, it was first announced by Theresa May, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And we've been, it was going to be a bill, then it became a white paper. Earlier, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, the white paper will be coming out in the spring. If you've dealt with government, the spring extends to the end of July and to the recess there. So there's still a bit of time. But are there other things? I know the department is working on it. It's just whether there's any will from ministers and Secretary of State actually to deliver it.
Do you think it's something that landlords really need to be nervous about? I mean, that's the headline, isn't it? That landlords are hiding behind the sofa and dreading what's going to be announced. But do you think it's necessarily bad news? I mean, there's talk about a landlord's register and things, but it could just be a registry of individual properties rather than focusing on the landlords themselves. I mean, what's your feeling? Could it bring certainty to landlords? I
think there is a degree of certainty. I think there's a degree of legitimising the landlord. I think a register would be good because at least we can, or the powers that be can identify where rented property actually is. There's probably a subtext to that from the government's point of view is if I know where you are, then I can tax you because you may not be declaring your rental income sufficient. I think, as I said before, there is an inevitability about it. I don't think landlords should be, if they're good landlords, there's nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. Good landlords and good tenants. I know that Section 21 is going to be abolished, but they're going to beef up Section 8, hopefully. So, no, I think that there's been a lot of scaremongering going on. As I said, it is inevitable. They do need to do a register. They need probably to be redressed for landlords as well, or tenants, sorry, redress for tenants, because there isn't any at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll sit on our hands and see whether it comes before government.
Yeah, it's the same old story, isn't it? Just waiting and seeing. Okay, well, let's move on because obviously there's nothing concrete to talk about yet on that one. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is something that we touched upon in our last residential expert discussion, but we didn't have really much time to explore it in detail. And that's really this issue that's a bit of a blight on the sector these days, and in that just how long it's taking to go from having an offer accepted on a house to actually completing. I mean, it's supposed to be 12 to 16 weeks, but it's frequently over 20 now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right on those statistics. I think it's on an average now, it's around 19, but as you say, it can go well over 20. I was speaking to somebody just last week who agreed the sale of their property in October, and they still have not exchanged contracts, and that was with a complete chain. So that is just madness. We know that traditionally an estate agent would convert its pipeline, i.e. those properties that have been sold subject to contract, into those that have exchanged and completed 4 times a year. They're barely able to do that 3 times a year now because of the time it takes. We get all sides involved in the transaction throwing stones at others to say it's your fault. I think there's got to be a wholesale, not only review of the legal process or simplification of the legal process, make it mandatory for properties when they go on the market that they're not only just market ready, i.e. the photographs have been taken and the brochure's been prepared, but they're sale ready. In other words, if a seller appears the next day, all the paperwork has already been completed by the seller, all the preliminary work has been done by the lawyer, and in other words, you will get given a sales pack, which you do when you sell by auction, and you can move forward. But at the moment, we're not seeing that. We know that the conveyancing industry is hugely under-resourced because people have either left the industry or been ejected from the industry at the beginning of the pandemic. So I can't see any sign that it's going to, excuse me, it's going to get any quicker very quickly.
I mean, what do you think? What's different now from 5 years ago? Why is it taking so long?
Well, if you look back historically, we were annually having transactions at 1.25, 1.3, 1.5, 1.7 million, and the legal and financial system was able to cope. And it is bizarre that in this age of technology, that actually things have got worse. They haven't got better. It used to be pretty much a manual system. Now, if you go onto one of the big conveyancer sites, it's all there for you to see. I think it's just that there isn't the urgency. Is there a feeling now of caution? Everybody's is wary about getting something wrong. Are those that are involved in conveyancing no longer capable of making decisions on their own? Historically, when you moved 20 years ago, you'd have used a solicitor. You wouldn't have used a conveyancer, you'd have used a solicitor who was qualified. There may be a conveyancer as well. Now, of course, you can use somebody that's all they do is a conveyancer. So is there a way around? I think the other problem is that the fees have been driven so far down that actually
conveyancing fees.
Yeah, compared to historically, you might be paying £1,500 to move. Now you can do it for 250 or 300 or 400, and obviously people are drawn by that. We've got the issue about referral fees. Does the agent refer you to the lawyer or conveyancer that's going to pay them the best fee, or do they refer them to the person that's going to get it through the quickest? And we know that referral fees, whilst they're mandatory to disclose them, how often do people do that in a visible way? The feeling was that it would be mandatory to ban them. That doesn't look like that's going to happen now. So someone needs to grasp it. But we were talking about fixing the housing market under Theresa May. Sajid Jain, who was Secretary of State for Housing, announced it. Now, politically, that's a long, long, long way away. Or time.
Well, I guess the hope is that technology might play a role in speeding things up, and that as we move towards everything being digitized, I can see a future perhaps, or I'll be interested to know if you can, where everybody is joined together. So mortgage providers, conveyancers, estate agents, all linked together on a same platform, all communicating and things like that, like whether, you know, people can upload documents, sign documents electronically, and whether, you know, there might be a future in that.
I think there is a future. We've been talking about a property logbook for a long time, so all the information about your property is there at any time. It's automatically updated, so it would be that requires a lot of work. I think you'll get there earlier with rented property, because a landlord can do it. But when you get people who are, or the average consumer is only moving once every 15, 20, 25 years, it takes a long time to update anything unless it's done automatically. I think Land Registry will be working hard on this as well, to try and get that. So there are people working on it. It's just taking an inordinate amount of time to actually see the light of day.
Yeah. With the lack of stock on the market as well, I mean, agents really need this area to be improved, don't they? Just to get the money in through the door, because it's obviously not good that it's taking so long.
I think also, if it is simpler and quicker, people will be encouraged to move more. You know, at the moment, no one looks forward to moving house. Well, they look forward to the ultimate, I've moved into my new house, but the process is hugely frustrating and doesn't encourage you to do it unless you really have to.
So, I mean, is there anything else that we should talk about with this issue? I'm just trying to think now. I mean, we've been through the problems, we've been through the, you know, potential solutions. I guess again, it's this wait and see, isn't it?
It is. It is in the hands of the government to do that, or as I said, Land Registry are keen for it to happen. I think lenders would be keen for it to be quicker. Mortgage providers, I think everybody wants it to happen. It's just coordinating all those groups together and have a system in place that actually works and it doesn't just crash.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next topic, and that was something that was in the negotiator yesterday, about Property Mark. The people you know very, very well have released the results of a survey of theirs, which suggests obviously that the private rented section is shrinking at the moment. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. You know, do you think it's due to people moving back to cities, or, I mean, I know you've got thoughts on this, so I'll just let you talk.
Okay. Well, firstly, we know that the PRS has been shrinking slightly over the last year, 1 to 2 years. That is partly, I think, because those who've held property for a long term, who may not be professional landlords, have seen that the sales market is going extraordinarily well. Values have increased substantially, which nobody forecast when the pandemic first hit. So some of those will be saying, actually, now's a good time to sell. I'm going to sell my investment property and buy perhaps a much larger home for themselves. You know, a lot of property is held by landlords who only have one property, so they're not professional. We know that there's been a huge amount of legislation. We've talked about the renters reforms. There's lots of negatives perceived coming down the track. The returns that they were getting were not great, but actually, if you look at the rental inflation over the last 2 years, rents have risen very substantially. So there isn't that sort of reason for why you should come out of the market. Those that are seeking to buy are also finding that actually, if you're renting whilst you're saving, it's almost an impossible hill to climb, because I'm paying a premium rent, which is probably 60+% of their net salary, whereas opposed to 40% if I had a mortgage. So that those tenants don't necessarily want to buy, but that's not the case. There is a huge demand still out there. We've seen that there was an exodus, we know, from London in the early days of the pandemic. I think that's coming back, very to the same level, but you only have to look at places where the sales market has either been very, very strong, in places like the West Country, but also where those properties that were traditionally let on a short hold tenancy are now being let under short-term tenancies, such as Airbnb or others. You have to look at what's happening in Edinburgh, in East Anglia. So that's all combining. I think that the survey that Property Mark put out would be based on their monthly statistics that are very accurate and come through. And I think some people may have misinterpreted it to say that the housing stock available for renters has substantially decreased. What I think I probably, looking through the figures, is the fact that the properties available to rent, i.e. vacant, available for a new tenant, have reduced quite substantially, because I think people are staying, and we know people are staying a lot longer in their rented or rental property because they can't afford to buy anything. So those that would traditionally be, and up until a year or two ago, it was probably 22 months that somebody stayed in a property. Now that's much, much longer. Yeah. Much longer. So they're not moving. They're not allowing people to move into what they were living in. So again, that's all working together to make it very difficult. But I don't think it's an alarmist report in a way that stock has shrunk to such a small level. I think it's available stock. It's probably shrunk quite significantly.
And that's obviously not going to be helped by the cost of living crisis. People are going to want to stay where they are because of the expenditure involved in actually moving.
Absolutely right, Joe. And I think the other issue is, are they going to be pressured to put rents up? Because, as you say, the cost of living is going up. And I think if we see a really rapid rise in rents combined with the cost of living, we are going to see tenants who are going to be experiencing some hardship.
So I guess what we really need is more landlords to get involved.
We need more landlords. We know the government is encouraging, build to rent, but that's a very, very slow actually adding to stock. And we know build to rent is normally a premium product, and it should be, but it will be attracting a premium rent.
So what do you think the government could do for landlords? Because it's all been doom and gloom, hasn't it, over the last few years, really. Now we have the Renters Reform Bill, which may or may not be bad news, but people will read the headlines and be put off, and more landlords will be looking to leave the market, leave the sector. What do you think the government could do?
Well, I think firstly put their arm around landlords, because they perceive landlords as villains, and they're not, by and large. It is an unregulated sector, and I think if it was regulated, that would encourage more people to be part of it as a landlord. And if there's a register of landlords, again, we can keep track of where rented properties are. It's just very difficult when we have experienced traditionally of a low volume sales market. We've now got a relatively high volume sales market, but still with stock very low. So whether or not, we know that there's this suggestion that the government may be coming out with an announcement that allow people under help to buy, allow them to buy the housing that they're rented. But that, we hope, will only be, I don't say we hope, that is anticipated only to cover social housing, which is not necessarily a good thing. But if landlords perceive that actually the government is going to repeatedly target them and penalise them, there won't be much to encourage them to join that sector or to expand their portfolio.
We're just talking about the outlook for the sector more broadly here. Obviously, with the Tories in slight trouble at the moment, that's probably an understatement to say a little bit of trouble, after the vote of no confidence just narrowly survived by Boris Johnson yesterday. I'm wondering whether it's often in times of trouble the Conservatives look to give the property market a boost. And I'm just wondering whether you can foresee a situation in which they revisit stamp duty again and perhaps look to reduce it or even abolish it entirely.
Well, you're right that traditionally the Tories will see their voters being homeowners. So what can they do to encourage the homeowner? I think the stamp duty issue needs to be revised, but we would be then looking at a property. There will still be tax. There'll be a property tax. So we might see council tax, property or stamp duty all rolled into one. But if that's going to happen, that's going to be an annual tax. And do people want to pay more out of earned income or investment dividends that way? I think the government could do more to encourage those that are buying, for those that are downsizing, to actually do it. But the downsizing, I suppose, necessity has cooled because people are able to remain in their own home without having to sell, because they're the last of the baby boomers, those who are coming up, retiring and have retired, and they probably paid their mortgage off and may well have an index-linked pension. So they're not selling their properties age 65 and finding something smaller. So you've got that log jam of property at the top. And as you say, we've got first-time buyers who were probably encouraged by low interest rates. We now know we've got an inexorable rise in interest rates. Whether they could do something to tax relief on mortgages, or the interest paid on mortgage, which, as we know, was in place after the war and right until the late 1980s, when it was withdrawn and the market crashed for 5 years. So they need to do something, and something substantial rather than just window dressing.
But of course, if we now enter a period of political upheaval, then of course things will get put on the back burner again.
I'm afraid they will, and all the portents are pointing that life is going to be very tough financially. It's amazing that the market has been resilient until now, but the affordability issues will mean that people can't be as bullish as they were. I'm not thinking there's going to be a property crash. I think it's just going to be a cooling.
Yeah. Well, I think that just about wraps things up. I mean, is there anything else that's caught your attention in the property news that you'd like to talk about?
Only probably about material information that agents, as of the beginning of June, are required to give on their sales particulars and on the portals from day one, and that's about tenure and about leasehold, and being transparent about leasehold and the charges associated with that. Having sat on that working group, I know that this is just the beginning. There will be more material information that will be required up front, but I think that is a good thing, because it then means there is more available for someone to make a considered decision before they enter into a transaction, rather than find something out halfway up, after 3 months, that there is a leasehold, there is a land charge, there is an estate charge, or whatever. So I think
that goes back to one of the topics we talked about earlier, and actually speeding up the time to get purchases over the line.
Absolutely. So property is always in the news, and continue to be so. And I think people are saying that the market may have hit its peak, and may start to cool in August, which is traditional time when people go away, if they can at the moment, if they can find an airline, and sit on their hands until September. But we shall see. Excellent.
Well, thanks again for your time, Mark. We'll catch up again in a month's time for Residential Expert in July, the 3rd edition. And until then, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.